At the Prestige Club, the most expensive restaurant in Manhattan, all conversation suddenly stopped. Richard Blackwood's voice echoed through the hall. "I'll give you $100,000 if you serve me in Chinese." Everyone turned to look. The green bills landed on Jasmine's silver tray like falling insults. The money spread across the shiny metal, catching the eyes of New York's richest people. Jasmine Williams, 29 years old, stood frozen. She never imagined her life would end up like this. Once she was a respected doctor of linguistics. Now she worked as a waitress, serving $5,000 champagne to men who didn't even look at her face. Richard leaned back in his Italian leather chair. A cruel smile spread across his tanned face. "What's the matter, honey? Isn't 100,000 enough?" he said, pointing toward 3 Japanese investors sitting at his table. "My friends here will judge if your Chinese sounds real." The whole restaurant turned into a silent arena. Guests pretended to eat their food, but everyone was listening. It was Tuesday night in the financial heart of New York, a place where powerful men made world-changing deals before dessert. Jasmine looked down at the tray. $100,000. It was more than she earned in 2 years. Enough to pay her mother's medical bills, move her sister to a better school, and finally breathe without the weight of constant worry. But she knew this wasn't about money. It was about power, about Richard Blackwood, a 52-year-old real estate tycoon, trying to show his guests that he could humiliate a simple waitress just because he wanted to. Richard clapped slowly, mocking her. "If you fail, you'll have to apologize in front of everyone for wasting our time. I bet you don't even know how to say thank you in Chinese." The investors laughed awkwardly. One of them, an older man with gold-rimmed glasses, looked uncomfortable. Jasmine took a deep breath. Her hands tightened on the tray until her knuckles turned white. For a moment, her mind went back to the time when she was Dr. Jasmine Williams, giving lectures at international universities, known for her intelligence and skill. 3 years ago, everything had fallen apart when her mother got cancer. The medical bills, the debts, the bankruptcy, it had all destroyed her life. Now, she stood here, facing a man who probably didn't even know proper English grammar. "I accept," she said firmly. Richard's smile disappeared for a second. "What did you say?" "I accept your proposal, Mr. Blackwood. I will serve you in Chinese. And when I finish, you will pay me the 100,000, right here, in front of everyone." People in the restaurant whispered and laughed. They thought the waitress was crazy to accept. But Jasmine's calm eyes showed the strength of someone who had survived far worse. If this story has you hooked, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Because what happens next, you'll never forget. Richard clapped again, the sound loud and cold. "Perfect. Let's make this even more interesting," he said. Turning to the investors, he smiled cruelly. "Gentlemen, you just saw real arrogance. This woman actually believes she can impress us." Hiroshi Tanaka, the oldest investor, frowned and adjusted his glasses. "Richard, maybe we should—" No, Hiroshi," Richard interrupted. "You need to see how the world works. These people live in dreams." He waved his hand toward Jasmine. She probably watched a few kung fu movies and thinks she can speak Chinese. Another investor, Kenji Yamamoto, spoke calmly. His English was clear and perfect. "This is becoming uncomfortable, Richard." "Uncomfortable?" Richard laughed loudly. "This is educational. You want to invest in New York? You must see reality. This woman probably never even finished high school. She works here because she's good for nothing else." Jasmine didn't move. But inside, her mind was full of memories. The years she spent as Dr. Jasmine Williams, professor of computational linguistics at Columbia University. She was once an expert in natural language processing, fluent in 9 languages, and invited to speak at global events. And now, all that knowledge was about to become her greatest weapon. Everything changed one night with a phone call. "Your mother had a stroke. It's serious." Dorothy Williams, 58 years old, was Jasmine's only family. She was in a coma. At first, the medical bills came slowly, but soon they became a mountain of debt. Insurance refused to pay for experimental treatments and special therapies. Jasmine sold everything: her Manhattan apartment, her car, her jewelry, even her collection of rare books. She took a short break from the university, then a longer one, and finally, she never went back. After 6 months, Dorothy woke up, but she wasn't the same. She needed care all day and all night. She needed expensive therapy and constant medicine. The insurance covered only part of it. Jasmine had no choice. The debt reached $800,000. She went bankrupt. The university replaced her. Colleagues stopped calling. Friends disappeared when they realized she could no longer help their careers. Richard's voice brought her back to the present. He was drunk with arrogance now. "Do you know what the problem is with you people?" he said loudly. "You always want more than you deserve. You try to be something you're not." Jasmine blinked and watched him speak without realizing who he was talking to. A woman with a PhD in applied linguistics from MIT, an expert in Chinese dialects, someone who once taught graduate students about Mandarin tones and pronunciation. "Do you know how many languages I speak?" Richard asked the investors proudly. "English and money, and that's all that matters in the real world." The third investor, Yuki Sato, finally spoke. His English was soft but clear. "Maybe we should give her a real chance, too." Richard laughed. "A real chance? Yuki, you're too kind. Look at her." He pointed at Jasmine with a cruel smile. "She carries trays for a living. She probably rents a tiny room in the Bronx." He wasn't far from the truth. Jasmine shared a small apartment with 3 other people. She worked 2 jobs, waitress at night, caregiver during the day. She slept only 5 hours when she was lucky. Every dollar went to her mother's medicine and therapy, but Richard didn't know that she still read academic research late at night, that she wrote to professors in Beijing in perfect Mandarin, that her old thesis on computer language learning had been cited in more than 200 international papers. Richard leaned back and raised his voice. "Let's make the rules clear," he said, enjoying every second. "If she can give a full presentation of the menu in Chinese, not just single words, but detailed explanations, I'll pay her the $100,000. "Richard, this really isn't necessary," said Hiroshi quietly, but Richard ignored him. "When she fails, and she will fail, she'll kneel right here and apologize to everyone in this restaurant for wasting our time." A heavy silence filled the hall. Even the waiters stopped moving. All eyes were on Jasmine, and more than that, Richard continued, "She'll admit she tried to deceive us, that she's nothing but a desperate liar craving attention." Yuki shook his head, clearly upset. "This isn't right. It's absolutely right," Richard shouted, slamming his fist on the table so hard that the glasses shook. "You want to do business with me? Then understand how I work. I don't tolerate lies, acting, or anyone trying to make me look like a fool." Jasmine stayed calm, the calmness of someone who had already lost everything once. 3 years of humiliation had taught her one thing: there are moments to stay quiet and moments to stand tall. This was her moment to stand tall. "Accept all your conditions," she said firmly. Richard laughed in disbelief. "Even kneeling and apologizing when you fail?" "Yes," she said. "If I fail, I will." Richard turned to the investors with open arms, his voice full of pride. "Gentlemen, you're about to see the difference between real confidence and pure illusion." He didn't realize that every cruel word he spoke was giving Jasmine more strength. Inside her, a quiet fire burned, built from 3 years of pain and silence. As everyone waited to watch another act of power and humiliation, no one noticed the faint smile on Jasmine's face. It was the smile of someone who already knew. Some battles are won long before they are fought. "Very well," Richard said. "Then let's begin this little show," Richard said loudly, clapping his hands like a circus director calling for attention. "But first, let's make sure there's no cheating." He turned to a nearby waiter. "Bring the special Chinese menu, the one we use for investors from Shanghai." The waiter hesitated. "Mr. Blackwood, that menu has over 40 dishes with very technical descriptions." "Perfect." Richard laughed. "If our so-called language expert really knows Chinese, a few technical details shouldn't be a problem, right?" Hiroshi Tanaka looked uncomfortable. "Richard, this is getting cruel." "Maybe we should—" "Cruel," Richard interrupted. "No, Hiroshi. This is education. People like her need to learn their limits." He pointed at Jasmine. "Look at her, still standing there like she's confident, like she can fool us." What Richard didn't know was that at that very moment, Jasmine's mind was racing. Not with fear, but with precision. She was reviewing her doctoral research on Mandarin dialects and regional food terminology. 3 years ago, she had spent 6 months in Beijing as a visiting researcher at the China Foreign Languages University. Her focus? The vocabulary used in Chinese culinary culture, the exact type of words now written on that menu. Her professor, Chen Mingyardu had been very strict. He would tell her in Mandarin, "Dr. Williams, if you can't describe a Sichuan dish with the right Beijing tones, how will you ever translate trade contracts for global companies?" Jasmine had cried many nights in her small Beijing apartment, repeating tones, memorizing words, and studying not just language but culture, the kind of details only native chefs would know. She had defended her thesis entirely in Mandarin, answering questions for 2 hours from a panel of Chinese professors, without using a single word of English. While Richard waited for the menu, he smirked. "So why don't you tell us about your experience with languages?" he said, making air quotes mockingly. "Where did you learn Chinese, watching movies with subtitles?" Yuki Sato, who had been quiet, finally spoke up. His voice was calm and polite. "Richard, may I ask something?" Richard leaned back. "Go ahead. Why is this so important to you?" Richard smiled arrogantly. "Because, Yuki, you're thinking of investing $200 million with me. You need to understand how I work, how I detect people who pretend to be something they're not." He pointed toward Jasmine. "This woman is lying about her skills. And if I can't spot a simple lie like this, how could you trust me with your investments?" Kenji Yamamoto shook his head. "That doesn't make sense, Richard. Even if she doesn't know Chinese, it has nothing to do with business. It has everything to do with integrity," Richard shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "I don't tolerate liars, fakers, or anyone trying to make me look like a fool." While Richard ranted, Jasmine stood still, quietly observing. In 6 months of working at the Prestige Club, she had learned to read people, especially powerful, arrogant men. Richard Blackwood was easy to read. He always bragged about his Asian connections, yet constantly mispronounced Japanese names and confused Chinese and Korean traditions. Just last week, he had embarrassed himself in front of Korean clients by quoting ancient Chinese customs. To Jasmine, he wasn't a man of culture. He was a fraud wearing an expensive suit. "Ah, here it is," Richard said when the waiter returned carrying a leather-bound menu. The special Shanghai menu, 3 full courses, each with detailed descriptions. He opened it and looked at the Chinese characters. His confidence dropped for a second. "Well, there are a lot of symbols here," he mumbled. Hiroshi leaned forward. "May I take a look?" No, Richard said quickly, closing the menu. "She needs to do this alone. No help." He handed it to Jasmine. "Come on, expert. Describe 5 dishes in Chinese. Full explanations." Jasmine took the menu and opened it. A faint smile appeared on her face. She immediately recognized the dishes. Sichuan specialties. She had studied and even prepared during her cultural immersion classes in Beijing. "Can I choose which dishes to describe?" she asked calmly. "Of course," Richard laughed. "Pick the easiest ones. You're going to fail anyway." But as Jasmine looked down at the menu, something changed in her eyes. Richard couldn't see it. But in her mind, she was already flipping through pages of memory, recalling years of study, precision, and discipline. The battle he thought he had already won had, in truth, already been decided. Jasmine remembered her presentation at Beijing University. It was about how food words in Mandarin had changed over time. She had spoken in front of 200 people, including famous chefs and food experts. "Before I start," Jasmine said, looking directly at Hiroshi, "I want to confirm something. Are any of you fluent in Mandarin?" Hiroshi looked surprised. "I speak a little," he said. "What about you, Mr. Yamamoto?" Kenji shook his head. "Just the basics." "Why do you ask?" Richard laughed loudly. "See? She's already making excuses." "Oh, you guys won't understand anyway," he said in a mocking voice. Pathetic. Jasmine stayed calm. "Actually, I just want to make sure someone here can judge my pronunciation, tone, and accuracy." Yuki Sato sat up straight. "I can," he said slowly. "I was born in Osaka but lived in Taiwan for 10 years. My Mandarin is fluent." For the first time, Richard hesitated. "Well, that's perfect," he said, though his voice was less confident now. Inside, he felt a wave of uneasiness. Jasmine's calmness was no longer just annoying. It was starting to feel real. "There's one more thing," Jasmine said. "You said this test is about honesty and integrity. So let's make it more interesting." "How?" Richard asked, his voice tightening. "If I can describe 5 dishes in Mandarin," Jasmine said, "and also explain where they come from, how they are made, and what they mean in the culture, you double the bet to $200,000. The room went silent. Even the waiters froze. And if I fail, Jasmine continued, I'll kneel and apologize and work here for free for 1 month. Richard stared at her. For a moment he wanted to refuse, but the investors were watching. He couldn't look weak. 200,000, he repeated. That's right, Jasmine said, and a month of free work if you fail. Correct. Hiroshi tried to stop it. This has gone too far, he said. But Richard interrupted. I accept. He extended his hand. Deal. Jasmine shook it firmly. Deal. What no one knew was that 3 years ago, Jasmine had been invited to a dinner by the Chinese ambassador in Washington, where she had translated speeches about food and culture, live in Mandarin. Her research paper had even been published by Cambridge University Press under the title Linguistic Bridges: How Food Vocabulary Reflects Cultural Change in Modern Mandarin. For 6 months, she had lived with Chinese families, learning not just the words but the emotions and traditions behind them. As Richard prepared to watch what he thought would be her humiliation, Jasmine took a deep breath. She was ready to prove the difference between arrogance built on money and confidence built on true knowledge. The menu was open in front of her. The investors leaned forward. The whole restaurant went silent. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Then, with perfect calm, Jasmine began to speak in Mandarin. Her tone was so fluent and precise that even Yuki Sato's eyes widened. Good evening, gentlemen, she said. Allow me to introduce our special dishes for tonight. Her Mandarin was pure and elegant, showing years of hard work and study. We will begin with authentic Sichuan mapo tofu, she said. It is made with 2-year-old peachy and chili peppers using the traditional recipe of Master Chen from Chengdu. Richard blinked in confusion. Wait, is that real Chinese? Yuki raised his hand quietly. Be silent, he said, amazed. Jasmine continued in Mandarin. This dish represents the balance between mala, the numb heat of Sichuan pepper, and the spice of red chilies. The soft tofu shows harmony between simplicity and complexity. She's speaking perfect Mandarin, Yuki said in shock. My God, he added in English, looking at the others. She's not just speaking Chinese, she's explaining deep food philosophy with words that even many native speakers wouldn't know. Richard's face turned pale. That must be a trick. Jasmine looked at him and, for the first time that night, smiled. Would you like me to continue in Beijing dialect, Hong Kong Cantonese, or maybe Taiwanese Mandarin, Mr. Blackwood? She asked calmly in English. What do you mean by different dialects? Richard stammered. Well, Jasmine said, switching smoothly into fluent Cantonese. In Hong Kong, we present the same dish differently, following the traditions of Qing dynasty tea houses. Yuki slammed his hand on the table. That's perfect Cantonese. She even has an authentic Hong Kong accent. Richard was now trembling. Who are you? He demanded. Jasmine looked at him with calm authority. I am Dr. Jasmine Williams, she said. Ph.D. in computational linguistics from Columbia University. I specialize in natural language processing, fluent in 9 languages. I was a visiting researcher at Beijing Foreign Studies University.
And I'm the author of Linguistic Bridges: How Food Vocabulary Reflects Cultural Evolution in Modern Mandarin.
Published by Cambridge University Press. The restaurant fell completely silent. I also worked as a translator for the United Nations, embassies, and international conferences, she continued. 3 years ago, I left everything to care for my mother after she had a stroke. The medical bills destroyed my savings. Her voice remained strong. Hiroshi was speechless. You're a real doctor? He whispered. With a postdoctoral degree in Chinese dialectology from MIT, Jasmine said. I spent 6 months in Beijing studying food terminology for my thesis. Richard's voice broke. That's impossible. A doctor can't be a waitress, Jasmine interrupted. Why not, Mr. Blackwood? Don't doctors need to eat? Don't they pay bills? Can't they have sick family members to care for? Yuki stood up, his tone firm. Richard, you just tried to humiliate one of the most educated people I've ever met. I didn't know, Richard said desperately. Exactly, Jasmine replied coldly. You didn't know, but you assumed. You saw a black woman working as a waitress and decided she was ignorant and inferior. Kenji shook his head in disbelief. Richard, what kind of man are you? Let me finish the presentation, Jasmine said calmly, switching back to Mandarin. The second dish is Peking duck, prepared with the traditional method from the famous Quanjude restaurant founded in 1864, the 24-hour marination, and the use of a fruitwood oven create the crispy skin that represents centuries of Chinese cooking skill. Her tone was flawless, technical, and confident. Richard was sweating. The guests at nearby tables stopped eating. All eyes were on her. The third dish, Jasmine continued, is Shanghai Xiaolongbao. Each dumpling must have exactly 18 folds, which symbolize prosperity in Chinese culture. The soup inside is made from pork marrow that melts into liquid when steamed, a method first created during the Ming Dynasty. Yuki quickly translated for the others. She's explaining details that only master chefs know. This is incredible. Stop, Richard suddenly shouted, slamming his fist on the table. Stop this act. This is all a setup. Setup? Yuki asked coldly. You mean the setup where she actually knows more about Chinese culture than you ever will? She can't be a doctor and work here, Richard yelled, his voice cracking. Why not? Hiroshi asked sharply. Because people like you believe intelligence belongs only to the rich? Jasmine placed the menu on the table. Mr. Blackwood, she said softly, you offered me $200,000 to do something I was already doing professionally 5 years ago, writing technical descriptions of Chinese food. That was literally part of my research. Richard ran his hands through his hair, muttering, This can't be happening. It is, Yuki said firmly, pulling out his phone. And you know what, Richard? My company was planning a $200 million partnership with you. He started typing. No, wait, Richard said, panicking. Richard stood up in panic. Kenji said firmly, A man who insults a smart woman in public just because of prejudice is not someone we will work with. He also took out his phone. You can't cancel everything because of a misunderstanding. Richard begged. Misunderstanding? Hiroshi laughed coldly. You tried to destroy this woman's dignity for fun. That's not a misunderstanding. That's cruelty. Jasmine watched Richard break down. But she felt no joy, only sadness that people like him still existed. Mr. Blackwood, your $200,000, please, she said. With shaking hands, Richard opened his wallet and started counting the money. Each bill he placed on the table seemed to take away a piece of his pride. When he was done, Jasmine said calmly, Now I want you to apologize. Not to me, but to everyone who has suffered from your prejudice. Richard looked around. Everyone in the restaurant was watching, important clients, rich and powerful people, witnessing his complete humiliation. I apologize, he whispered. I didn't hear you, Jasmine said softly. I apologize. Richard shouted. His voice echoed through the silent hall. In that moment, one of the most powerful men in Manhattan begged for forgiveness. Everyone realized they had just seen something greater than revenge. They had seen how true greatness always shines, even when tested by small-minded people who think money makes them better than others. 6 months later, Jasmine sat in her office on the 47th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper. She was now the director of intercultural relations at Tanaka Yamamoto International. She earned $180,000 a year and had become a well-known expert in global communication. Mr. Yasuki Sato himself had offered her the job after that unforgettable night. People with your intelligence and dignity are exactly what we need to expand worldwide, he said in perfect Japanese, a language Jasmine also spoke fluently. Her mother, Dorothy, now received the best medical care. They had moved to a big, beautiful apartment on the Upper West Side. Her mother's recovery was slow but steady. Richard Blackwood was not so lucky. The story of his public humiliation spread everywhere online. The video was titled, Racist Tycoon Destroyed by Dr. Waitress. It got over 15 million views. The Japanese investors canceled the $200 million deal and shared the story in global business circles. Other investors pulled out. Banks stopped trusting him. Within 3 months, his company went bankrupt. His wife divorced him and took half of everything. His grown children cut ties with him, too ashamed to be associated with his name. Richard lost his apartment, his luxury car, and his reputation. Later, Jasmine spoke at Columbia University as a guest lecturer. He tried to make me feel small because he thought money made him better, she said. But he learned that intelligence, dignity, and skill cannot be bought. The audience gave her a standing ovation. Some students even cried, moved by her story. Richard now works as a salesman at a car dealership in Queens, earning minimum wage. Sometimes he sees Jasmine on TV, always respected, always successful. Jasmine learned that the best revenge is not to destroy your enemies. It's to build something so great that their hate becomes meaningless. She turned years of humiliation into strength. Life tried to silence her, but she answered with excellence. Racism tried to limit her, but she rose beyond all limits. Arrogance tried to humiliate her, but she rose higher than anyone expected. If this story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. For more stories that prove greatness is not about skin color, background, or status, but about the strength to never give up on who you truly are.